He pushed his way to the front of the crowd, clutching nothing but a dented coffee can full of coins. "Sold to the homeless guy with the tin cup," the auctioneer smirked. The crowd erupted with laughter. They called him crazy, pathetic, but when he rolled back into town just weeks later, that laughter died faster than you could blink. Welcome to MS Incredible Stories. Let's uncover what really happened. The sun had barely crested the horizon when he spotted the car, its faded cherry red paint marred by rust, and its once proud body sagging on bald tires. Nobody paid much attention as the auctioneer rattled off the lot number and the starting bid. He clipped a few coins from his battered tin cup, the only savings he'd scraped together in weeks, and stepped forward. A swell of laughter rippled through the small crowd as he placed his bid, lowest and alone. They saw only the broken engine, the dented fender, the cracked windshield, and assumed the worst. But when no one else countered, the hammer came down, and the man, known to most as Rusty, walked away with a forlorn Mustang and a promise no one else believed in. Back on the street, Rusty surveyed his prize. The engine coughed when he tried to turn the key. The horn emitted a feeble honk before dying. Passers-by shook their heads, muttering that he'd lost what little dignity he had left. Yet the morning light caught something in his eyes, a spark that mirrored the Mustang's once lustrous finish. Carefully, he guided the car onto a cracked sidewalk, imagining the roars it must have once made on open highways. He spent the afternoon pushing the Mustang to the old service bay at the edge of town, the car's weight reminding him of the obstacles he faced every day. Neighbors peeked from doorways, certain it would stall or die altogether. Inside the garage, an elderly mechanic named Marjorie offered to take a look. She'd seen him around and respected the quiet resolve she recognized. As she popped the hood and peered at the battered engine, Rusty watched, hope and trepidation warring in his chest. When Marjorie shook her head, Rusty felt a familiar sinking, but then she smiled. "It'll take time, but she's not beyond saving." He held his breath as she wiped grease from her hands. It was the first person to believe in his vision. Outside, a few onlookers lingered, curiosity softening their earlier mockery. As the late-day sun cast long shadows across the garage floor, Rusty realized that more than a car had changed hands today. In that moment, with a broken Mustang and a mechanic's promise, he felt something he hadn't in a long time: the possibility of redemption. He returned to the garage the next morning, the scent of oil and gasoline welcoming him like an old friend. The Mustang sat on jack stands, its undercarriage exposed and waiting. Rust clung to every bolt and beam, orange filigree on dull metal, that testified to years of neglect. As he knelt beside the car, his hands instinctively brushed over pitted surfaces, feeling the texture of time's toll. Memories rose unbidden. Afternoons in his father's workshop, the snap of wrenches and the warmth of pride as they restored engines together. He traced a corroded patch on the rocker panel and winced, remembering how life had leaned on him, wearing him thin until the man he once was felt irretrievable. Marjorie appeared with 2 steaming mugs. She handed him one without a word. He inhaled the bitter warmth as she crouched opposite, her gaze steady. "Where shall we start?" she asked, voice gentle but firm. He closed his eyes, considering the question as the garage door rumbled open to admit a stray beam of sunlight. There were so many places to begin, so many failures to undo. The man lifted the mug and met her eyes. "Everywhere," he said quietly. The morning passed in a rhythm of scrubbing wire brushes across stubborn rust, applying penetrating oil to seized nuts, and carefully unbolting fatigued brackets. Each release of tension in the metal was a small victory, but also a reminder of how long he'd been stuck in this state of disrepair, both in car and self. At one point, a rusty spring snapped, sending him sprawling back with a gasp. Marjorie's calm hands steadied him before he could hit the ground. "Careful," she murmured, eyes softening. The sting in his palm mirrored the ache in his chest. Regrets, missed opportunities, the roads he never took. By late afternoon, he had cleared the worst of the corrosion from the chassis rails and replaced 2 brittle hoses. The Mustang looked bruised but sturdier. He leaned against the fender, wiping sweat from his brow, and let himself feel the weight of accomplishment mixed with the ache of remembrance. The rust was receding, but so were the layers he'd built to protect himself from hope. As he packed away tools, Marjorie paused at the door. "Tomorrow, we tackle the engine block," she said. He nodded, swallowing hard, aware that the hardest work lay ahead. Outside, twilight settled over the town, and Rusty walked home with a lingering echo of oil and possibility in his clothes, and for the first time in memory, a softness in his heart that said he might just outrun regret after all. Morning light revealed a thin layer of frost on the Mustang's windshield, incongruous on a late spring day, but fitting for a car as beaten as this one. News of Rusty's project had spread, and by mid-morning a small crowd gathered outside the garage. Neighbors leaning against fence posts, teenagers propping skateboards, and tourists idling in rented convertibles. They whispered behind their hands, eyes fixed on the old car with amusement. He emerged from the bay, wiping grease from his forearms, and felt their stares prick at his skin. A woman in a bright sundress pointed. A man with a camera phone raised an eyebrow, smirking in a way that stung. Rusty straightened, squared his shoulders, and climbed into the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine protested with a harsh rasp and shuddered into humming life, though uneven and rattling. A ripple of surprise ran through the onlookers, followed by chuckles. He eased the Mustang out of the garage and onto the street, its frame creaking under the shift of weight. The crowd's laughter swelled, mixed with derisive comments. "Nice tick-tock. Don't break your back, buddy. Bet it won't even go 30. He felt a familiar heat rise in his cheeks, but willed himself to focus on the road ahead. However, short the drive. At the end of the block, he rounded a corner and returned, faster this time, giving the engine a chance to roar between gear shifts. The exhaust belched smoke, and the Mustang lurched forward. The laughter faltered into murmurs, uncertainty replacing amusement. He navigated past the curious circle and parked with a deliberate grace, cutting the engine and exhaling slowly. Silence settled, broken only by the Mustang's gentle tick as hot metal cooled. He climbed out and walked to the front bumper. A boy, no more than 10, stepped forward, eyes bright. "That was awesome," he said, voice small but earnest. The crowd shifted, faces softening as one by one they approached, offering nods of respect instead of ridicule. Rusty smiled, fatigue and hope mingling in his chest. He rapped knuckles against the hood. "She's coming back," he said, more to himself than to them. The neighbors murmured their agreement. The laughter had faded, replaced by something new, anticipation. As afternoon light warmed the street, Rusty realized the journey ahead would be shared, and the crowd that once mocked was now waiting to see how far the broken Mustang, and the man who believed in it, might go. Moonlight sliced through the garage's grimy windows, lending everything a silver sheen as Rusty crouched beside the exposed engine. The day's work had left him both exhausted and invigorated, an odd combination that sent tremors through his hands. He adjusted the carburetor's linkage one last time before stepping back to study its alignment. Somewhere behind him, the town's streetlights dimmed, leaving only the hum of the fluorescent bulbs overhead and the Mustang's steady heartbeat. He'd come back after hours, unable to sleep with questions twisting through his mind. What if the engine seized again at the first test drive? What if he'd wasted his last coins on a lost cause? Shadows danced across the walls as he leaned in, tracing a thread of oil where none should be. A slow smile curved his lips, a revelation born of patience and intuition. The carburetor's gasket was misaligned by just enough to starve the engine at low RPMs and flood it at higher throttle. It was an oversight he'd made in haste earlier that afternoon, and correcting it might finally grant the Mustang the steady idle it needed. Tools slid from his jacket pocket, Marjorie's old wrench and a thin gasket scraper. And with careful precision, he nudged the carb into perfect position, retightened the clamps, and cleaned the stray oil with a rag. He paused, heart pounding in a hush, and let the silence settle. Then, with a deep breath, he turned the key. The engine snorted awake, idling smoothly this time, its rhythm confident and unwavering. It was a revelation as profound as sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Rusty felt a thrill surge through him, equal parts relief and awe. The Mustang's metal panels vibrated in affirmation, and for the first time, he saw her not as rust and regret, but as a vehicle reborn. He sank against the workbench, closing his eyes against the fluorescent glare, letting the moment wash over him. Somewhere, half-forgotten dreams flickered back to life. Open roads, wind in his hair, the horizon beckoning. In the stillness of midnight, he understood that this car was more than a project. It was a promise to himself that he could rebuild more than just metal and rubber. He could rebuild hope. Outside, the moon traced a path across the sky as the Mustang purred in steady rhythm, a midnight revelation echoing in every turn of the crankshaft. A week later, Rusty stepped into the alley behind the garage to retrieve a missing wrench and found a man slumped against the brick wall. His clothes were threadbare, pockets empty, and a battered backpack lay at his side. Rusty's first thought was to apologize for startling him, but the stranger looked up with tired eyes that held a quiet dignity. "Sorry about that," Rusty said, handing over the wrench he dropped. The man studied the tool as if it were a treasure before meeting Rusty's gaze. "Thanks," he replied, voice rough but steady. He glanced at the Mustang, its freshly painted door gleaming under the afternoon sun, and a faint smile flickered. "Nice ride." Curiosity pushed Rusty to ask how he ended up here. The man shrugged, patting the bag. "Lost a job, lost a place to stay. One day, everything just slipped away." He paused, as if weighing his words. "I've been hitching around, doing odd jobs, sleep wherever I can." Rusty saw no shame in him, only resilience. Over the next days, the stranger returned. Sometimes he sat quietly on a crate, watching Rusty work. Other times he offered to help, wiping down parts or fetching tools. Rusty learned his name was Gabriel, and that he'd once been a mechanic's apprentice before life's misfortunes derailed him. Watching Gabriel tighten a loose bolt on the Mustang suspension, Rusty realized the man's hands were steady and skilled, the same kind of hands he remembered from his father's workshop. One evening, Gabriel produced a tattered notebook filled with diagrams and notes, design sketches of performance upgrades and chassis improvements. "Just ideas," he shrugged, "but it helped me sleep at night." Rusty flipped through the pages, impressed by the depth of Gabriel's knowledge. Marjorie, who'd arrived to collect a tool, watched the exchange with a knowing look. Later, she pulled Rusty aside. "He's a good man," she said softly. "Don't let pride keep him from standing on his own again." That night, as Rusty locked up, he found Gabriel asleep on the garage floor, the notebook clutched to his chest. Rusty hesitated, then covered him with an old blanket and left a blanket rolled behind the toolbox. The next morning, Gabriel was gone, but a note remained. "Thank you. You gave me hope." Rusty pocketed the message and glanced at the Mustang. He'd rescued one life, and now someone had rescued his. The stranger's presence had become part of the journey, proof that redemption ran deeper than metal and rust. He returned to the garage at dawn, the pale light revealing fresh footprints in the dust where Gabriel had stood. The workbench held the stranger's notebook open to a page detailing an adjustable suspension geometry, an idea neither Marjorie nor Rusty had considered. Rusty studied the sketch, tracing the worn pencil lines with his finger. Gabriel had seen capabilities in the Mustang that Rusty, blinded by rust and regret, had overlooked. Marjorie arrived soon after, coffee in hand. "What's this?" she murmured, nodding at the diagrams. Rusty explained how Gabriel's designs could transform the ride quality and handling. She raised an eyebrow, impressed. If we adapt these, she might corner like a modern sports car. Rusty felt a thrill. The Mustang's body was classic, but inside, its bones could be reborn as something exceptional. He spent the morning fabricating custom brackets and reinforcing strut mounts, referencing Gabriel's notes. Each measurement was precise, every weld deliberate. Marjorie watched him work, then offered guidance on metallurgy and load distribution. Rusty realized that Gabriel's unseen potential had unlocked theirs as well. Late afternoon brought Gabriel back, wary but hopeful. Rusty greeted him with a notebook, now mingled with Rusty's annotations in the margins. "Thought you'd like to see," he said. Gabriel's eyes widened as he leafed through the combined designs. "You actually did it," he whispered, voice thick. The pride in his smile caught Rusty off guard. They installed the new suspension components together, Marjorie supervising. As the Mustang settled onto its wheels, the car's posture shifted, sleek, aggressive, poised for performance. Rusty climbed inside, turned the key, and navigated a gentle curve outside the garage. The difference was astonishing. The body leaned less, the steering felt alive beneath his hands, and every bump transmitted confidence instead of rebellion. When he returned, Rusty cut the engine and looked at Gabriel. "I couldn't have done this without you," he admitted. Gabriel shrugged, eyes bright. "You made it happen." As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Rusty realized this project had become more than restoring a car. It was about seeing hidden strengths in metal, in machines, and most importantly, in people. The Mustang's newfound agility stood as a testament to that truth, and for the first time, Rusty and Gabriel stood together not as rescuer and stranger, but as equals, partners in transformation. The morning sun warmed the garage as Rusty found Gabriel leaning against the Mustang's fender, arms folded, watching Marjorie polish the hood. Their shared project had woven an unspoken camaraderie between them, and today, something shifted. Gabriel stepped forward, his hands smudged with grease. "Mind if I take her for a spin?" he asked. Rusty hesitated. Trust wasn't given lightly, but the earnest hope in Gabriel's eyes softened his resolve. "Go ahead," he said, stepping aside. Gabriel eased into the driver's seat, his posture cautious at first. Rusty and Marjorie trailed behind as Gabriel coaxed the engine awake, the Mustang responding with a confident growl. They followed on foot as Gabriel navigated the winding back road behind the garage. The car handled every twist and crest with precision, but it was Gabriel's face that told the true story. Concentration gave way to exhilaration, and for a moment, he seemed unburdened by the years that had worn him down. When Gabriel returned, he parked smoothly and climbed out, hands trembling with adrenaline. He met Rusty's gaze, and for the first time, neither needed words. In that look lay respect, gratitude, and an unexpected bond formed through shared labor and mutual belief. Marjorie smiled, licking her thumb to polish out a final streak. "You two make quite the team," she said lightly. Over the next days, they fell into a rhythm. Rusty and Gabriel worked side by side, one tightening bolts, the other calibrating settings. Nights were spent poring over old repair manuals and racing through what-if scenarios from Gabriel's notebook. They shared meals of leftover pizza in the garage bay, swapping stories of past failures and small triumphs. Rusty learned that Gabriel's life had fractured after a factory closure cost him his apprenticeship. Gabriel learned that Rusty's past was scarred by his father's death and a string of bad decisions that led him to homelessness. Yet beneath their rough exteriors, both carried a relentless hope that found its outlet in the Mustang. One evening, as they locked up, Gabriel laid a hand on Rusty's shoulder. "Thanks," he said simply. Rusty nodded, words catching in his throat. He realized that the car, once a symbol of his own downfall, had become the crucible for a friendship neither expected. As they walked away under a sky heavy with stars, the Mustang rested quietly in the garage, its transformation echoing the bond that now linked two men who had found more than restoration in its chassis. They had found each other. Late one evening, Rusty and Gabriel fired up the Mustang to test the upgraded engine under load. The roar was music to their ears as they revved through the gears, but on the third shift, a harsh clatter reverberated from the block. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, leaving them in stunned silence. Heat from the oil pan glowed under the garage lights as Rusty popped the hood. Thick smoke curled from the intake manifold, and metal fragments clung to the valve cover. Gabriel reached for a flashlight, hands shaking. "That doesn't look good." Rusty's jaw tightened. They had pushed the engine hard, but this was unexpected. Carefully, they drained the oil into a pan. It ran dark and gritty, Flecks of metal drifted like ominous debris. Gabriel's face went pale. "Rod bearings," he whispered. "They've seized." They stood side by side, absorbing the weight of the setback. The Mustang's heart was wounded, and reviving her now meant rebuilding from the inside out. Marjorie arrived at the sound of their curses. She lit a lantern and peered at the battered valve train. "It's a big job," she said softly, "but we can fix it." Rusty looked from her to Gabriel, then back at the engine. The hours of progress felt washed away in an instant, and the laughter of onlookers echoed in his memory. He swallowed hard, pride and frustration clashing. They spent the next morning disassembling the top end, removing the air cleaner, unbolting the intake, and lifting the manifold. Every component exposed fresh damage: scored cylinder walls, warp heads, and a crankshaft that had worn grooves. Gabriel worked with steady determination, his apprentice's hands precise despite his shaken spirit. Rusty handed him tools, offering quiet reassurance. By dusk, the engine lay stripped down to its block. The silence in the garage was heavy, punctuated only by the drip of coolant from a disconnected hose. Rusty closed his eyes and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Gabriel placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get her running again," he said. "Together." Rusty nodded, resolve hardening in his chest. The broken engine was no longer a sign of defeat, but a challenge to overcome. Under the flickering lantern light, they began cataloging parts, planning the rebuild. In that moment, they accepted the next phase of their journey, tearing down to rebuild stronger than before. The dawn light had long faded when Rusty's phone buzzed. Marjorie's reminder that parts would arrive by midnight. He and Gabriel spent the day gathering specialty tools and laying out new bearings, gaskets, and pistons on the workbench like surgical instruments. Each piece gleamed with promise under the overhead bulb, a silent testament to the miles they planned to reclaim. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, they shut the garage doors and switched on every lamp, transforming the space into an all-night workshop. Gabriel mixed engine grease with steady hands while Rusty tightened the torque wrench to spec on a fresh set of main bearings. The Mustang's block sat on the stand, bit by bit revealing its naked core. Midnight arrived with a quiet hum as the delivery van pulled up. They signed for the parts: new camshaft, lifters, and high-performance oil pump. Then ushered the boxes inside. Unwrapping each component felt ceremonial. Gabriel cradled the camshaft like a newborn, eyes alight with anticipation. Rusty loaded the lifters one by one, ensuring each seated correctly in its bore. Hours slipped past in a rhythmic dance of pistons sliding into bores, cylinder heads torqued down, and timing chains aligned to an imperceptible degree. Conversation dwindled to soft murmurs, a shared glance when a bolt threaded smoothly, a nod of approval when the oil pump turned with firm resistance. Outside, the world slept unaware of their vigil. At 3 a.m., Marjorie appeared with hot coffee and reclaimed sandwiches. She surveyed their progress, a satisfied smile touching her lips. "You two make a good team," she said, setting mugs on a clean section of workbench. Rusty accepted a cup with a grateful nod. Caffeine was both lifeline and reward, and sipped the bitter warmth as he and Gabriel worked the final piece into place. By 5 a.m., the rebuilt engine stood whole once more. Rusty wiped his hands on an old rag and peered at their handiwork: gleaming head bolts, clean manifolds, and a freshly painted valve cover. Gabriel cracked a grin, exhaustion and pride mingling in his expression. "She's ready." They shared a long moment of quiet triumph before Rusty climbed behind the wheel and turned the key. The garage filled with the Mustang's reborn heartbeat, a strong, even pulse that resonated through the concrete floor. Gabriel and Marjorie exchanged relieved smiles, and Rusty allowed himself a soft laugh. In the stillness before dawn, the late-night repairs had done more than rebuild an engine. They had cemented a brotherhood forged in grease and resolve. He woke before sunrise, caffeine and adrenaline still humming through his veins, and found Gabriel sifting through a dusty box of spare parts. Among nuts and bolts, Gabriel's hand froze on a tarnished medallion engraved with a vintage Mustang emblem. Rusty recognized it instantly. It was the badge his father had once worn on his own jacket. He gently lifted it, tracing the worn edges. Gabriel looked up. "Found this wedge between the fuel pump and that broken manifold," he said. Rusty felt a tremor in his chest as memories of his father flooded back. The feel of his calloused hands guiding young Rusty's grip on a wrench, the echo of his laughter in their cramped workshop, and the day he never came home. The medallion was more than metal. It was a fragment of a life left behind. He slipped it into his pocket and joined Gabriel, who was sorting through old service logs left by previous owners. Pages yellowed with aged, detailed modifications, track days, and a faded photograph of a previous owner standing proudly beside the Mustang at a grassroots race. The man wore a broad smile and a leather jacket that matched the medallion's insignia. Rusty felt connected across time to strangers who had loved this car. Marjorie arrived with a thermos of tea. She watched them quietly before offering. These cars carry stories in every scratch and dent. She gestured to the photo. Each owner laid down a mark, some intentional, some not, but every one added to her soul. As they cleaned the parts box, they uncovered more relics. A service tag from a small-town mechanic, a stub of a race ticket, and a handwritten note tucked into a valve cover reading, "Run true. Come home safe." Rusty read it aloud, and Gabriel nodded. Someone cared deeply. He placed the medallion on the workbench, alongside the other fragments, and together they arranged them into a makeshift shrine. The Mustang, once orphaned and forgotten, had a lineage, hands that had built and broken her, dreams that had faltered and soared. Rusty exhaled, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. The fragments of the past were more than reminders of loss. They were signposts guiding him forward. He realized the car's restoration was entwined with his own. As dawn light spilled into the garage, he touched the medallion and whispered, "We'll honor every story." Gabriel placed a steady hand on his shoulder, and in that shared silence, they vowed to carry the Mustang's legacy into tomorrow. The afternoon sun beat down as Rusty tightened the last lug nut on the Mustang's freshly powder-coated wheels. Each spoke gleamed with promise, the tires new and sturdy beneath them. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow, and admired how the car's stance had transformed, balanced, purposeful, ready. Gabriel joined him, holding a jug of coolant. He poured it into the radiator with a steady hand while Rusty topped off the differential fluid. Marjorie circulated between her welding project and their workspace, offering occasional pointers and a nod of approval. Their teamwork hummed like a well-oiled machine. Yet, under the surface, both men felt the weight of what lay ahead. The wheels of determination would need more than parts. It demanded resolve. Rusty climbed into the driver's seat, placed the key in the ignition, and turned it. The engine purred, and he eased the Mustang out of the garage. Gabriel followed on foot as Rusty navigated the gravel drive, testing acceleration, listening for anything amiss. They cleared the street and headed toward the old airstrip where Rusty's father once taught him to floor the throttle. The long, straight runway stretched ahead, the cracked pavement fading into scrubland. Rusty felt his pulse quicken. Each mile he'd logged mending the engine and chassis had led to this moment. He shifted into first, then second gear, and the Mustang surged forward, the new wheels gripping the ground with confidence. At the halfway mark, he downshifted and braked smoothly, turning the car around in a perfect arc. Gabriel waved as he approached, eyes alight. Rusty parked at the strip's edge and climbed out. He and Gabriel stepped forward, inspecting the tire tracks, straight, clean, and true. Gabriel grinned. "She handles beautifully." Rusty nodded, pride filling his chest. "We did it." Marjorie stepped up, wiping her hands on a rag. "The real test comes next," she said, "but you've proven she's ready." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the runway, Rusty placed a hand on the Mustang's roof. Its transformation mirrored his own, from battered and overlooked to powerful and poised. The wheels of determination had carried them this far, and in their hands now lay the next chapter, taking the restored Mustang beyond garage walls and proving that determination, like a strong set of wheels, could carry a dream to its destination. Late one afternoon, a delivery truck rumbled down the alley and deposited a large crate by the garage door. Rusty and Gabriel exchanged puzzled glances. Neither had ordered parts. Together, they pried open the crate to reveal a gleaming OEM Ford steering wheel, wrapped carefully in protective foam, alongside a handwritten note. For the hands that save what others discard. Rusty's breath caught. They unwrapped the wheel, admiring its pristine grip and subtle Mustang logo etched in brushed metal. Gabriel turned the wheel over, inspecting the quality of the leather stitching and the weight of it in his hands. "It's perfect," he said quietly. Rusty felt a lump in his throat. Whoever was, they understood exactly what the Mustang and Rusty himself needed. That evening, under the garage's harsh lights, they removed the old, cracked steering wheel. Rusty's hands trembled slightly as he unbolted it. Each turn of the wrench felt like parting with a piece of the past. When at last the new wheel was snug in place, he ran his fingers along its smooth rim. The leather was cool and firm, a stark contrast to the weathered remnant it replaced. Marjorie arrived with cold sodas and surveyed the scene. "Looks like someone believes in you both," she said, nodding at the unattached wheel. Rusty glanced at Gabriel, who shrugged in wonder. Neither knew who was, but the gesture carried more weight than any shipment of parts. The next morning, Rusty guided the Mustang out for a test. His hands settled naturally on the new wheel. It felt like an extension of his own resolve. Each turn brought a confidence that surprised him, as though the gift had smoothed not only the steering, but his own path forward. Gabriel followed on foot, watching Rusty navigate the garage's tight turns without hesitation. Back inside, Rusty placed the handwritten note on the workbench, next to Gabriel's notebook and the bits of his father's medallion. A silent collage of reminders. Help can come from unseen places, and kindness holds power to steer lives as surely as a steering wheel guides a car. As dusk fell, Rusty and Gabriel cleaned up, their spirits lifted by a stranger's gift. In that moment, the kindness of the unknown sponsor became part of their story, a reminder that when someone believes in you, even the smallest gesture can unlock unseen potential and keep the wheels of determination turning. Dawn broke crisp and clear as Rusty slid into the driver's seat. Gabriel perched on the fender like an eager co-pilot. Marjorie held her clipboard nearby, ready to record data. Rusty's heart thundered as he whispered a silent prayer to his father's memory, then turned the key. The engine answered with controlled power, the new steering wheel firm beneath his fingers. They rolled onto the empty highway that curved along the outskirts of town, tires whispering on asphalt. Rusty eased the Mustang in a third gear, feeling the suspension absorb every ripple. Gabriel grinned, calling out, "She's solid." Rusty pressed the accelerator, and the car lunged forward, settling into a smooth pulse that matched his own racing heartbeat. They reached the straightaway by the old grain silo, and Rusty shifted down. He watched the tachometer climb, then floored it. The Mustang roared, surging ahead with authority. The world blurred outside the windows as wind rushed through the open side vent. Gabriel's laughter echoed behind him, pure, unguarded joy. At the silo's end, Rusty braked hard, mastering the new brake's bite. The car dove forward, then leveled as it slowed, the wheels gripping with uncanny precision. Marjorie nodded and jotted notes. Braking distance improved, no chassis flex, perfect weight distribution. Rusty guided the car through a series of S-curves, hips and shoulders of pavement shaped by seasons of sun and rain. The Mustang's body leaned just enough to feel the momentum, then righted itself like a dancer. With each corner, Rusty shed a layer of doubt. Every clatter, rattle, and sputter of the past had been silenced by this moment of harmony. When he returned to the meeting point, Gabriel opened the door, stepping down and stretching stiff limbs. "Best ride I've ever been on," he declared. Marjorie offered a rare, wide smile. "You've earned this." Rusty killed the engine and sat in silence for a heartbeat, drinking in the sense of completion. He shut his eyes and pictured his father standing beside him, pride shining in his eyes. As the morning sun warmed the hood, Rusty climbed out and placed a hand on the Mustang's fender. This was more than a test drive. It was proof that resilience, teamwork, and belief could revive something thought lost. The road ahead stretched invitingly under the sky, and in that first test drive, Rusty knew both he and the Mustang were ready to chart new paths together. By midday, word of the Mustang's revival had spread beyond the garage. Rusty stepped outside to find a small group gathered on the sidewalk, neighbors leaning forward, whispering as he emerged from the bay. Their curiosity was palpable. Mothers paused with strollers, delivery drivers slowed their trucks, and even the town gossip peeked around the corner. He climbed into the driver's seat and backed out, inviting them to watch as he maneuvered the car through the narrow street. The Mustang's engine purred, drawing murmurs of appreciation. A woman murmured, "Is that the same car?" A teenage boy nodded, eyes wide. He fixed it all by himself. Rusty caught the boy's gaze and offered a small nod before guiding the car past storefronts. As he drove, hushed comments floated through the open windows. "Look at that paint job, like new. And it moves so smoothly. I never thought he'd make it run." The whispers carried more weight than laughter had. They spoke of surprise and newfound respect. Rusty felt a warm pulse in his chest, the echoes of doubt dissolving into anticipation. He circled back and parked near the curb. Gabriel had joined the sidewalk crowd, arms crossed but beaming. He tapped Rusty's shoulder and gave a thumbs up. Rusty stepped out, wiping grease from his hands, and approached the onlookers. A small child tugged at his pant leg. "Can I touch it?" she asked shyly. He knelt beside her and showed her how to feel the smooth metal of the fender. "She's been through a lot," he said softly, "but she's stronger now." The child's eyes gleamed as she pressed a finger to the emblem on the hood. Around them, the whispers grew more animated, questions about how he'd done it, who had helped when they could take a ride. Marjorie emerged from the garage and offered a wave. The crowd parted to let her through, respect shining in their expressions. Rusty realized that their story had become everyone's story, a testament to what determination and community could achieve. As the group dispersed, leaving Rusty, Gabriel, and Marjorie alone in the quiet street, Rusty looked up at the car he once feared was lost forever. The whispers on the street weren't just noise. They were the first verses of a new anthem, one of redemption, resilience, and the road that lay ahead. The garage door rumbled shut behind them as twilight settled, and Rusty flipped on the overhead lights, casting a warm glow over the Mustang. Gabriel stood at the far end, studying a new set of performance spark plugs while Marjorie organized tools on a nearby pegboard. The air smelled of hot metal and possibility. Rusty wiped sweat from his brow and picked up an iridescent spark plug, examining the electrode gap with care. "These will sharpen her throttle response," he said, voice low with excitement. Gabriel moved to lean over the engine bay, his reflection rippling across the polished valve cover. "I've never seen plugs like this," he admitted. "Where'd you get them?" Rusty grinned. M's gift didn't end with the steering wheel. Together, they installed each plug, tightening them in sequence with synchronized movements born of hours spent in this very space. Every click of the torque wrench felt like a note in a rising chord. As Gabriel connected the ignition wires, Marjorie sprang a surprise. She wheeled in a small arc welder and set to fabricating a custom cover for the distributor to protect it from grit and moisture during long drives. Sparks flew in brief, staccato bursts, each one dancing across the concrete floor before fading. The trio paused, watching the arcs leap between electrode and metal. Rusty felt a thrill in his chest as the reflections glittered off the Mustang's chrome air cleaner. Sparks in the garage weren't just metalwork. They were the embodied energy of their collaboration, the raw creativity that had transformed a broken engine into something alive. When Marjorie finished welding, she wiped her brow and gave Rusty and Gabriel a knowing look. "That distributor cover will keep things clean. She's built for the long haul now." Rusty slid behind the wheel, heart pounding as he turned the key. The engine burst to life, smoother and more powerful than ever, every spark plug igniting the mixture with precision. Gabriel beamed from beside the car. She's a masterpiece. Rusty nodded, eyes bright. The glow of the garage lights, the scent of fresh oil, and the humming engine blended into a single moment of triumph. In the heart of that small, cluttered garage, sparks had ignited far more than metal. They had sealed a dream and bound 3 lives together in pursuit of a shared future on open roads. The next morning, Rusty woke to an unfamiliar tension in the air. Word of a fundraising drive for a new community center had drawn townsfolk to the empty lot across from the garage. But instead of cheerful chatter, he heard skeptical whispers. A group of neighbors clustered by a banner announcing Rusty's Mustang Rally exchanged frowns as they watched the car gleaming in the sun. He climbed into the driver's seat, engine rumbling low, and rolled down the window. A man shook his head. "That car's a gimmick," he muttered. A woman next to him crossed her arms. "He's only doing it for attention." Rusty's knuckles whitened on the wheel. He'd hoped the rally would raise money for the center, but doubt had settled over the community like a stubborn fog. Gabriel jogged up beside the car, wiping grease from his hands. "They're not convinced it's for a good cause," he noted quietly. Marjorie joined them, concern etched on her face. "They need to see more than horsepower to believe in this." Rusty took a deep breath. "Then we'll show them." They spent the morning visiting small businesses, dropping off handbills explaining the rally's purpose. Proceeds to fund youth programs and after-school workshops. Rusty stood behind the counter at Mrs. Delgado's bakery, offering free rides to anyone who donated a loaf. Gabriel demonstrated the Mustang's handling to the delivery drivers at the hardware store, inviting them to test the brakes in exchange for a pledge. Marjorie drove the car through the school parking lot during lunchtime, handing out flyers and chatting with students about the center's need for a safe space after classes. Slowly, attitude shifted. A baker grinned after her test ride and agreed to donate pastries and supplies for the rally. The hardware drivers nodded, marking their names on the sponsorship sheet. Students approached Rusty with shy enthusiasm, asking if they could help set up tables. By late afternoon, the lot across from the garage buzzed with renewed energy. Children ran past the banner, parents smiled, and longtime skeptics offered tentative support. Rusty stood beside Gabriel and Marjorie, watching neighbors pin donated posters to the fence. He realized that doubt had forced them to connect, to explain, to prove their intentions through action rather than words. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in warm hues, Rusty inspected the Mustang's polished hood. The community's doubt had become the catalyst for unity, and the rally would roar to life not just as a car show, but as a testament to what belief, persistence, and genuine purpose could achieve together. Late afternoon light filtered through the garage windows as Rusty tinkered with the Mustang's custom gauge cluster. Gabriel sat nearby, sketching ideas in his notebook. Marjorie adjusted the alignment on a fresh set of brake lines and hummed to herself, a habit that meant her mind was racing with possibilities. Rusty paused, running a gloved hand along the dash. "Have you ever tried laying lines yourself?" he asked Gabriel. The younger man looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Me? I learned hydraulic routing in my apprenticeship, but never got to practice it much." Marjorie grinned. "Why don't you give it a shot?" Rusty hesitated, then nodded, handing Gabriel a length of braided, stainless steel line. Under Marjorie's calm instruction, Gabriel measured precise bends, flared fittings with care, and secured the lines along the chassis rail. His hands moved with a skill born of dormant talent, each twist and torque revealing a confidence Rusty had never seen before. When Gabriel tightened the final fitting, fluid seeped out, too much slack. His brow furrowed. Rusty stepped in, guiding him through recalibrating the flare tool's pressure. Gabriel corrected the flare, tested the line, and found it sealed perfectly. Relief and pride flooded his face. "I forgot I could do that," he murmured. Rusty clapped a hand on his shoulder. "I never did." He realized that in restoring the Mustang, he'd overlooked Gabriel's own restoration of skills, identity, self-worth. Marjorie nodded, wiping oil from her hands. "Sometimes a project gives us what we didn't know we needed." They ran the brake system through its paces, pumping the pedal until firm pressure registered and inspecting each connection. The lines held steady under pressure, and Marjorie pronounced the work solid. Gabriel grinned, eyes shining. Later, as they stowed tools, Gabriel produced his notebook and added a new page, Brake Line Mastery, complete with diagrams and notes. He slid it across to Rusty. For next time, he said. Rusty placed the notebook next to the steering wheel had sent and the medallion from his father. In that simple exchange lay a testament to hidden strengths uncovered through trust and opportunity. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, the garage hummed with quiet triumph. The Mustang slept on its stands, and its human partners departed, each carrying something renewed. A car nearing completion, a stranger rediscovered, and a community inching closer to believing in the extraordinary. By mid-morning, the sky had clouded over, promising the storm that hovered on the horizon. Rusty, Gabriel, and Marjorie piled into the Mustang, Gabriel navigating with a map, Marjorie clutching her clipboard, and rolled toward the gravel backroads that led deep into the hills. Their goal was a test of endurance. 50 miles of unpaved trails and sharp switchbacks, a true proving ground for their labor. Dust kicked up in golden clouds as they set off, the Mustang's suspension flexing over ruts and loose stones. Rusty steered with steady hands, watching the gauges for pressure drops. When the first raindrops fell, the dust turned to mud and grit plastered the wheel wells. Gabriel pointed ahead to a steep descent slick with clay, while Marjorie offered calm guidance. They navigated the twist, tires biting into soft ground, the engine humming with resilience. As the rain intensified, visibility shrank. Rusty slowed, headlight beams sorting through the gray veil. Water sluiced across the hood, bellows of spray marking their passage. The road rose again, and Rusty shifted down, feeling the new clutch grab firmly even under slick conditions. Each bend demanded trust, in the car, in their skills, and in each other. Midway through the route, the storm let loose. Sheets of rain hammered the windshield, and the gravel churned into a quagmire. The car's wipers swiped furiously as they crossed a narrow ford, water lapping at the sills. Rusty held his breath as the Mustang plowed through, engine roaring, wheels thrashing. Gabriel's voice cracked through the roar. She's doing it. When they reached the ridge, wind whipping through open windows, they pulled over to survey the valley below. A waterfall of mist cascaded down distant slopes, and the Mustang's mud-streaked flank glistened like battle armor. Marjorie clicked notes into her phone. Engine temp stable, brakes responsive, no leaks detected. Rusty allowed himself a grin. On the return trip, the storm began to ease. Sunlight pierced the clouds in sudden shafts, illuminating droplets on the chassis. Gravel turned back to dust, but the forest still dripped emerald hues all around them. Rusty eased the car onto smoother roads, dust rising in swirling tendrils behind them. When they finally rolled back into the garage, the Mustang was a mosaic of grit and water, but it ran true. Rusty killed the engine and sat for a moment in the hush, each breath a tribute to the journey. Through dust and rain, they had tested more than metal. They had affirmed their belief in what could be achieved when perseverance met unyielding conditions. And in that quiet garage, with teammates by his side, Rusty knew they were ready for whatever road lay ahead. Word of the storm run test spread through town by evening. It started with a few impressed mechanics at the hardware store, then drifted to the cafe, where baristas whispered about how Rusty's Mustang had conquered mud and flood without faltering. By the next morning, the rumor had taken on a life of its own. Some claimed the car was invincible. Others swore it was powered by something beyond mere gasoline and steel. Rusty arrived at the garage to find a flyer taped to the door. See the unbreakable Mustang, tonight at dusk. At first he bristled. He didn't want hype, just honest work. But Gabriel's steady voice reminded him that this was their chance to channel excitement into something positive. Marjorie arrived with fresh coffee and offered a thoughtful nod. "Let them talk," she said. "Then show them what real grit looks like." That afternoon, they rigged the garage bay for a live demonstration. A makeshift obstacle course of oil-slick planks, a ramp for clearance testing, and a shallow trough for the water test. Neighbors trickled in, curiosity drawing them close. Rusty stood by the driver's door, Gabriel at his side, and Marjorie held a clipboard to record every moment. As dusk settled, the crowd hushed. Rusty fired the engine, its steady rumble cutting through the evening air. He guided the Mustang onto the course, tires gripping the slick planks as water jets simulated flooding. The car slid without losing traction, its chassis held firm when he climbed the ramp, clearing the height by inches. Gasps rippled through the audience. When he roared through the water trough, sending arcs of spray into the twilight, the whispering rose into cheers. Phones lifted to capture the moment, and the rumor crystallized into something tangible. This was no myth. Gabriel and Marjorie shared a look of triumph as neighbors clapped and called for an encore. After the run, people milled around the Mustang, touching its fenders and inspecting the undercarriage. One mechanic offered to sponsor a parts shipment. A local journalist jotted notes for a feature. Rusty felt his cheeks burn with pride, but also humility, knowing every victory was shared. That night, as they closed the garage, Marjorie turned off the lights and locked the door. "Tomorrow," she said, "they'll be lining up for rides." Rusty exhaled, the weight of the day settling warmly in his chest. The rising rumor had become a catalyst for community spirit, and the next chapter of their journey promised to be even more extraordinary. Late one morning, Rusty received a call from the city council. The funding for the youth center had dropped by half after a local donor withdrew support. Panic rippled through his chest. Without the rally's proceeds, the project would stall. He shared the news with Gabriel and Marjorie in the garage, their faces tightening with concern. They had just finished prepping the Mustang for another demonstration when Marjorie frowned at her clipboard. "We need a miracle," she said softly. Rusty stared at his hands, flecked with grease, and felt the weight of responsibility. The rally was weeks away. How could they recover a six-figure gap in time? Gabriel's eyes brightened. What if we turn the impossible turnaround into the show's centerpiece? A time drift and acceleration challenge. Something no one expected from a restored old Mustang. Rusty's heart thumped. It was risky. The car needed to be flawless, and the crowd could be unforgiving. But the rally needed a draw. "All right," he said, resolve hardening. "Let's do it." They spent the next days fine-tuning, upgrading the traction control, calibrating the throttle response for rapid shifts, and reinforcing the chassis for lateral stress. Late nights were a blur of test runs, data logging, and tweaking, with Marjorie barking precise adjustments and Gabriel noting every change in his ever-growing notebook. On the rally's opening evening, the bleachers were packed. The mayor took the microphone, announcing the impossible turnaround. Rusty would enter a 200-foot drift circle, spin 180 degrees, then explode straight through the finish line, all within 10 seconds. The crowd buzzed, doubt shimmering at the edges of their excitement. Rusty eased the Mustang onto the course, engine coiled with anticipation. He felt Gabriel's steady nod and Marjorie's thumbs up. He floored the throttle. The rear tires broke loose into a controlled slide. Rusty countersteered with the precision they drilled. Halfway through, he tapped the handbrake, pivoting the car in a decisive swing. As the Mustang straightened on the line, he mashed the accelerator. The engine screamed, and the car shot forward, crossing the finish in a blur. Silence snapped into thunderous applause. The mayor raced over, clapping Rusty on the back. A local entrepreneur handed Rusty an envelope. Inside was a sponsor check covering the deficit. Rusty exhaled, disbelief and relief mingling. The impossible turnaround had become their biggest triumph, transforming looming defeat into a victory that ensured the center would open as planned, and proving that determination, ingenuity, and trust could make the impossible possible. Rusty woke the morning after the rally to a quiet garage bathed in golden light. He found Gabriel leaning against the Mustang's fender, eyes fixed on the car, as if seeing it for the first time. "You did it," Gabriel said softly. Rusty shrugged, still riding the adrenaline high. Word of last night's feat had spread like wildfire. Neighbors peered through garage windows, eyes alight with pride. A young woman jogged by and paused to whistle. Children on bikes sidled up, pointing excitedly at the gleaming paint. Even rugged truck drivers tipped their caps as they rolled past. Rusty felt something warm unfurl in his chest. Admiration. Marjorie arrived with her usual thermos, this time filled with celebratory cider. She handed Rusty a cup. "You earned it," she said, her smile crinkling at the corners. He took a sip, letting the sweet fizz settle the nerves in his belly. Throughout the day, friends and curious onlookers drifted in, each offering congratulations. A local mechanic handed Rusty a custom plaque declaring him master of the impossible turnaround. A reporter from the regional paper snapped photos, her eyes shining as she interviewed him about teamwork and vision. Rusty found himself at the center of a circle of admiration he'd never imagined. He led a small group on a tour of the Mustang, pointing out the reinforced struts, custom suspension, and Gabriel's masterfully flared brake lines. As he spoke, he noticed Marjorie's proud expression and Gabriel's bright gaze, each look of respect and wonder anchoring his confidence. Late afternoon, the town's youth center committee members arrived, their faces eager. They presented Rusty with a framed proclamation, "In recognition of your extraordinary dedication and service." Rusty felt tears prick at his eyes. He glanced at Gabriel and Marjorie, who beamed back. As evening settled, Rusty climbed onto the Mustang's hood and surveyed the garage yard. Twinkling lights strung between telephone poles cast a warm glow over assembled neighbors, all gathered to celebrate the rally's success. Their eyes of admiration weren't just for a car. They were for a community restored, for a man who refused to give up, and for the unexpected bonds that had carried them to this moment. Rusty raised his cup.